The invitation felt like a small, sharp stone in my palm. Heavy, embossed, with lettering that shimmered under the lamplight. It was for the firm's annual Founders Ball, the biggest event of the year. Liam's name was printed in perfect, elegant script, and next to it, the words that twisted something in my gut: and guest. He came home late that night, smelling of city rain and ambition. He dropped his briefcase by the door, the sound echoing in our quiet apartment. "Big day," he sighed, loosening his tie as he walked toward me. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that was once loving but now felt like a habit, a box he had to check before moving on to the next task. "I saw the invitation came," I said, keeping my voice even. He glanced at the envelope on the counter and gave a weary smile. "Ah, that. It's going to be a long night. All the senior partners, big clients, you know how it is." I waited. A silence hung between us, thick with everything he wasn't saying. "It's really more of a mandatory networking thing," he continued, turning to the fridge. "Honestly, Faith, you'd be bored to tears. It's just endless talk about mergers and quarterly reports." He pulled out a bottle of water, not looking at me. "Besides," he added, the final, casual blow, "it's mostly just for senior staff and their spouses. We're not there yet, are we?" He smiled, a soft, placating smile meant to reassure me. The smile that always came before the word. "But someday," he said, his voice dropping into that familiar, soothing tone. "Someday, it'll be us walking in there, and everyone will know your name." Someday, that word was the foundation of our life together. It was the title of the chapter we were always about to start, but never did. Our home, our marriage, our future. It was all tucked away in the comfortable, hazy promise of someday. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just one night, just a boring work event. I told myself that until 2 weeks after the ball. I was scrolling through my phone on a quiet Saturday morning. Liam was still sleeping. A friend had tagged me in a photo album from a charity event. I clicked through them, half paying attention, until one picture made my blood run cold. It was from the Founders Ball. The professional photographer had captured the room perfectly, the chandeliers dripping with crystal, the men in sharp tuxedos, the women in elegant gowns. And there, in the center of it all, was Liam. He was laughing, his head tilted back, a glass of champagne in his hand. His other arm was wrapped securely around the waist of a woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful, blonde, and wearing a backless silver dress that shimmered like a fish's scales. She wasn't just a colleague he was standing next to. The pose was intimate, practiced. His guest. I zoomed in, my thumb trembling slightly. The caption beneath the photo read, "Liam Foster, rising star at Hayes and Associates with Isabella Croft, daughter of Croft Industries." Croft Industries. The multi-billion-dollar account Liam had been trying to land for the last 6 months. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. It wasn't just that he had lied. It was the cold, calculated precision of it. He hadn't just excluded me, he had replaced me with someone he thought was more valuable. Someone who could help his career. He hadn't gone alone. He had taken an asset. I felt a profound, bottomless shame wash over me. He had looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong in a room he was happily taking someone else into. He mocked my trust with his easy lies. He didn't think I was good enough. Not for tonight. Maybe not for any of his some days. I stood up from the couch and walked to the window. The city was waking up, cars humming on the street below. For 5 years, my world had revolved around him. His career, his schedule, his dreams. I had become a supporting character in my own life, a placeholder. The worst part was I had let it happen. Every time he said, "someday," I had nodded and smiled, believing it was a promise. But it wasn't. It was a postponement. A way to keep me waiting quietly in the wings while he decided if I was worthy of a role in the main production. That morning, the silence in our apartment felt different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was empty. I looked back at the photo on my phone, at his brilliant, false smile. He had betrayed me not with a passionate affair, but with a cold, strategic calculation. And somehow, that felt so much worse. I didn't confront him that morning. What was the point? He would just wrap it in the language of ambition, of necessity. He would tell me it was for us, for our future, for our someday. He would make me feel crazy for being hurt, so I stayed quiet. I let the hurt settle deep inside me, where it began to cool and harden into something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. He woke up around noon, stretched, and smiled at me. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, completely oblivious, and I smiled back a perfect, hollow smile. Morning. It all changed when I stopped seeing his lies as a reflection of my worth, and started seeing them as a reflection of his character. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet observation. I watched him like a stranger, noticing all the things I had chosen to ignore for years. The way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to answer a work call. The way he'd talk about his boss, Alistair Hayes, with a reverence he never used for anyone or anything I cared about. The way his eyes would glaze over when I talked about my own small victories at work. I was a freelance art curator for private collectors, a job that required nuance and a deep understanding of people. To Liam, it was just a cute hobby. I was living in a ghost story of my own making. I haunted the rooms of our apartment, a silent witness to a life that wasn't really mine. The emotional isolation was the hardest part. I had built my world around him, and without him at its center, there was just a gaping void. I'd walk through the city and feel completely detached, like I was watching a movie of my own life. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered so much it felt like I was physically breaking apart. One evening, about a month after the ball, he came home buzzing with excitement. "You are not going to believe this," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. "Alistair wants to have dinner with me." Alistair Hayes, the mythical founder of the firm, a man Liam spoke of like a deity. He said he wants to discuss the Croft account. "This is it, Faith. This is the final step. If I nail this, I'm on the partner track." He was practically vibrating with energy. He didn't notice the dead look in my eyes. "That's great, Liam," I said, my voice flat. "Great, it's everything we need to prepare." He started pacing the living room. He's old school, values family, stability. I need to look the part. I paused. "What part is that?" He stopped pacing and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. "The part of a man who has his life together, a man who is serious. Committed." He walked over and took my hands. His were cold. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Faith," he said, his voice earnest. "About our future." Oh, here it comes, I thought, the ultimate promise. The someday to end all somedays. "I think it's time," he said. "Once this partnership is announced, I think it's time for us to get married." He said it like he was offering me the deal of a lifetime. A prize I had finally earned through years of patient waiting. A year ago, I would have burst into tears of joy. I would have thrown my arms around him, my heart soaring. But now, his words landed in the silence of my heart and simply vanished. They had no meaning. They were just more words, more strategy. He wasn't proposing to me, Faith. He was proposing to the idea of a wife, a prop he needed for the next stage of his career. I felt nothing. Not joy, not anger, just a profound, hollow emptiness. "What do you say?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for the reaction he expected. I pulled my hands away gently. "I think," I said, choosing my words carefully, "that you should focus on your dinner with Mr. Hayes." His face fell. It wasn't the answer he was expecting. Confusion flickered in his eyes, quickly followed by irritation. "What's that supposed to mean? This is for us." "Is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Or is it for you?" He scoffed, turning away. "I don't have time for this, Faith. I'm talking about our entire future and you're being difficult. Can't you just be happy for me, for us?" He didn't understand. He couldn't. He saw the world only through the lens of his own ambition. I was just an object in his field of vision, sometimes useful, sometimes an obstruction. That night, as he slept, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The city lights cast shifting patterns on the wall. I thought about Isabella Croft in her silver dress. I thought about the casual way he had discarded me for the evening for the sake of an opportunity. And I thought about his proposal. A business transaction dressed up as love. He wanted a wife. A stable, supportive, respectable wife to stand beside him at company functions. The role I was auditioning for, apparently, was finally being offered to me. I realized then that the love I had for him hadn't just died. It had been starved to death, slowly, over years of neglect. He had fed it empty promises of someday until it simply wasted away. The loneliness was a physical presence in the room. It was cold and heavy, and it pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I got out of bed and walked to my small home office. On my desk was a stack of proofs for a catalog I was curating. The collector was a new client, someone who valued my opinion, who listened intently when I spoke. His name was Alistair Hayes. Liam didn't know. In his self-absorption, he had never once asked for the names of my clients. He knew I worked with collectors. The details were, to him, uninteresting. It had started innocently enough. A referral from a gallery owner I respected. We'd had a few phone calls, then a formal meeting at his office on a Saturday when it was empty. He was nothing like the Titan Liam described. He was quiet, thoughtful, with eyes that saw everything. He wasn't interested in art as an investment. He was interested in the stories behind the brushstrokes. He listened to me, truly listened, with a focused attention that made me feel seen. During our last meeting, he had paused while looking over a painting. "You have a remarkable eye, Faith," he had said. "You see the integrity in the work. It's a rare quality." His words came back to me now, in the dead of night. Integrity. Liam was selling me a life devoid of it, a marriage of convenience. He wanted to use my presence to signal his stability to a man who, ironically, valued the very quality his protégé so profoundly lacked. I stood there in the dark, the faint glow of my computer screen illuminating my face. Liam didn't want me. He wanted a symbol. And Alistair saw me. The cold, hard knot of hurt inside me began to loosen, replaced by a slow, creeping warmth. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something far more powerful. It was an idea. A quiet, radical, terrifying idea. Liam thought he was on the verge of getting everything he ever wanted. He thought he was in control, that he was the one making all the moves on the chessboard. I realized he had no idea what game he was even playing. That night, I made a promise to myself. Not a loud, declarative vow, but a quiet, internal shift. A realignment of my own soul. I would no longer be a supporting character. The next morning, Liam was a whirlwind of frantic energy. He had laid out 3 different ties on the bed, agonizing over which one projected future partner. "The navy blue," I said from the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. "It's classic. Trustworthy." He looked up, a flash of relief on his face. "Right, good call." He looped it around his neck, his fingers clumsy with nerves. "God, I can't mess this up, Faith. This dinner is everything." "You'll be great," I said. The words felt like they were spoken by someone else. They were smooth, supportive, and completely hollow. Inside, I was watching him from a great distance. He was a specimen under glass, a fascinating study in ambition and blindness. He saw the tie, the suit, the talking points for his dinner with Alistair. He didn't see me at all. "Just remember to listen more than you talk," I added, leaning against the doorframe. "Ask him about his collection. He appreciates people who take an interest in his passions, not just his business." He paused, his hands freezing on his tie. He looked at me, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. "How do you know that?" "I read an article about him once," I lied smoothly. "In some arts journal, it mentioned he was a serious collector." The surprise vanished, replaced by a dismissive nod. "Huh, right, good tips, see. This is why I need you." He smiled, that brilliant, empty smile. "We're a team." He kissed my cheek, a quick, dry peck, and then he was gone, the scent of his expensive cologne lingering in the air. A team. The word hung in the quiet apartment. We weren't a team. We were a benevolent dictatorship, and I was just now realizing I'd been living in occupied territory. That afternoon, I had a scheduled call with Alistair to discuss a potential acquisition, a small, moody landscape by a forgotten 19th century artist. "It's the brushwork," I said, looking at the high-resolution image on my screen. Most of his contemporaries were focused on grand, epic scenes, but he chose this quiet, overlooked marsh. There's a sadness to it, but also a resilience. See how the light hits the reeds. There was a thoughtful silence on the other end of the line. "You're right," Alistair said, his voice warm and resonant. "It isn't shouting for attention. It just is. It has an integrity to it." There was that word again. "Integrity? I'm glad you see it," I said softly. "Faith," he said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more personal. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but it's a pleasure to speak with someone who sees the world this way. So many people just see the price tag." "The price is the least interesting part of the story," I replied, and I meant it. "Precisely." I could hear the smile in his voice. "I have a young man in my firm, Liam Foster, bright boy. Ambitious, he's dining with me tonight. He sees all the price tags. I'm hoping to teach him that value and cost are 2 very different things." My heart gave a single, hard thud against my ribs. I kept my voice perfectly level. That's a good lesson to learn. Indeed, Alistair sighed. Well, let's acquire the marsh. I think it will be good for my soul. We ended the call, and I sat there in the silence of my small office, my hand resting on the mouse. He was trying to teach Liam the very thing Liam was incapable of understanding. Liam didn't see value, he saw leverage. He saw me not as a partner, but as a prop for his dinner. A prop he was now, unknowingly, asking for advice on how to impress the very man who respected me for everything Liam overlooked. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. That night, Liam came home long after I'd gone to bed. I pretended to be asleep as he crept into the room. He was practically humming with triumph. He thought he had nailed it. He thought his future was set. He had no idea his fate was being discussed on phone calls about forgotten paintings. The weeks that followed settled into a strange new rhythm. On the surface, nothing had changed. I still made coffee in the morning. I still listened to Liam's endless monologues about his work. But underneath, everything was different. I was living a double life, but my secret life was the only one that felt real. My work with Alistair deepened. We moved from phone calls to weekly meetings in the private study of his townhouse. It was a room filled with the quiet scent of old books and lemon oil. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. We would talk for hours. We started with art, but our conversations soon drifted. We talked about books, about music, about the quiet satisfaction of building something that lasts. He spoke of his late wife, Eleanor, with a gentle reverence that made my throat ache. He wasn't mourning her, he was celebrating her. He pointed out her favorite chair, the small, whimsical sculptures she had collected, the first edition book of poetry he had bought for her on their 3rd anniversary. She had integrity, he said one afternoon, tracing the spine of the book with his finger. She never pretended to be anyone but herself. It was the most attractive thing about her. In that moment, I felt a profound connection to him, a kinship that transcended our professional relationship. He was a man who understood worth. Not net worth, just worth. Meanwhile, Liam was becoming more and more unbearable. The partnership was close, he could taste it. And his proposal to me had become a recurring talking point, a future reward he dangled to ensure my continued compliance. Once the papers are signed, we'll start looking at rings, he'd say casually over dinner. Something classic, elegant, it's important to project the right image. I would just nod, a small, placid smile on my face. Inside, I was a silent, screaming cavern of rage and pity. He was designing a life for us, but he had forgotten to consult the other person who was meant to be living it. He never asked about my work, not once. If I mentioned a new acquisition, his eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, honey," he'd say, before steering the conversation back to his own world. One rainy Tuesday, I was at Alistair's house, reviewing auction catalogs. He brought in a tea tray and set it on the low table between us. "There's a retrospective at the City Gallery this Friday," he said, pouring the tea. "An artist Eleanor and I used to follow. I was wondering if you might like to join me." It wasn't a business invitation. His eyes were direct, his expression open. He was asking me to accompany him as a person, not as his curator. "I'd love that, Alistair," I said, my heart feeling strangely light. "Good," he smiled. "It's a black tie affair. I'm afraid it's one of those rather formal events." I thought of the founder's ball, of the silver dress and the casual, brutal exclusion. "I think I can manage," I said, my smile genuine for the first time in what felt like years. That evening, I told Liam I had a work event on Friday. "A gallery thing?" he asked, barely looking up from his laptop. "Okay, don't wait up for me. I'll be working late with the team. We're in the final push for the Croft deal." The ease of the lie was terrifying. He didn't ask which gallery. He didn't ask who I was going with. My life was a footnote to his. My absence was merely a logistical detail. Friday came. I spent the afternoon getting ready, a slow, deliberate ritual of self-care. I bought a new dress, a simple, elegant gown in a deep emerald green. It wasn't flashy or backless. It was just beautiful. It felt like me. When Alistair picked me up, he was holding a single, perfect gardenia. "Eleanor always said they smelled like moonlight," he said simply, handing it to me. As I pinned it to my dress, my fingers trembled slightly. This one small gesture held more thoughtfulness and true intimacy than anything Liam had done in 5 years. The gallery was beautiful, all white walls and soaring ceilings. The art was stunning, but the real masterpiece of the evening was the conversation. With Alistair, I felt not just heard, but understood. I felt my mind expanding, my confidence returning. I felt alive. As we were leaving, we stood for a moment on the gallery's marble steps, the cool night air on our faces. "Thank you for this, Faith," Alistair said, his voice quiet. "It's been a long time since I've enjoyed an evening this much." "Me too," I whispered. He looked at me, his gaze gentle and searching. "You know," he said softly, "when Alina passed, I thought this part of my life was over. The companionship, the simple joy of sharing a moment with someone who gets it." He paused, choosing his words. "I'm not a young man, Faith. I don't believe in wasting time on things that aren't real. And my time with you, it feels very real." I couldn't speak. My heart was in my throat. He reached out and gently took my hand. His was warm and steady. "I have no interest in games or ambiguity. I value honesty above all else, so I will be honest with you. I am developing very strong feelings for you." The city sounds faded away. It was just us, standing on the steps, the scent of gardenia and rain in the air. This was it. The turning point I never knew I was waiting for. "I feel the same," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. He smiled, a slow, wonderful smile that reached his eyes. "Good. Then we have a great deal to talk about." The drive home was quiet, but it was a comfortable, contented silence. He walked me to my door. "I live with someone," I said, the words tasting like ash. I had to tell him. He valued honesty, and so did I. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "The young man from my firm, Liam." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "It's complicated." "I see," he said. He didn't press. He didn't ask for details. He just stood there, giving me the space to own my truth. "Well, when it becomes less complicated, you know where to find me." He lifted my hand, brushed his lips against my knuckles, and then he was gone. I stood in my doorway for a long time, the warmth of his touch lingering on my skin. I walked inside. The apartment was dark and silent. Liam wasn't home yet. I went into my office and looked at my desk. My life, my work. My quiet, self-made world that Liam had never bothered to enter. For years, I had been waiting for someday. A someday that was always on Liam's terms, on his timeline. A someday that was conditional on his success, his approval. Alistair wasn't offering me someday. He was offering me now. A life built on mutual respect, on shared passions, on the quiet, sturdy foundation of integrity. Liam came home close to 2 a.m., smelling of stale coffee and desperation. "We're so close," he mumbled, slumping onto the couch. "Alistair is making the final decision on the partnership next week. He's meeting with all the candidates one last time." He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot with exhaustion and stress. "This is it, Faith. Our whole life is about to begin." I looked at him, at this stranger who thought he knew me, who thought he was building a life for me. He was so lost in his own narrative, so convinced of his own importance. The pity I felt was overwhelming. The next week passed in a haze. I packed my things, slowly, quietly, while Liam was at the office. I found a small, sunlit apartment in a neighborhood he would have considered beneath him. I moved my books, my art, my life. I left behind everything that belonged to him. On the final day, I left a note on the kitchen counter. It was short. "Liam, I've moved out. I wish you well. Faith." No drama, no recriminations. Just a simple statement of fact. My story with him was over. 2 days later, Alistair and I were married in a simple ceremony at the city courthouse. Our only witnesses were 2 of his oldest friends. I wore a simple cream-colored dress. He held my hand the entire time, his grip firm and reassuring. That afternoon, we sat in his study, the late sun casting long shadows across the room. A signed marriage license lay on the polished wood of his desk. He looked at me, his eyes full of a quiet, profound happiness. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, testing the name. "It suits you." I smiled. "It feels right. There is one piece of business we must attend to," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "My new partner will be announced at the Founders' Ball in 2 weeks." My blood went cold. The Founders' Ball. The place where it had all begun. All senior staff are expected to be there. With their spouses, he continued, his gaze steady. "Liam Foster is, of course, a finalist. He is very talented, very driven." He paused. "But a man's character is revealed not in his ambition, but in his choices." in how he treats people when he thinks no one is watching. I held my breath. I make it my business to know the character of the people I work with, he said, both in my office and in my life. He picked up the marriage license and slid it into a handsome leather-bound folder. That's when I realized the game wasn't just about my own private revenge. It was about character. And Alistair Hayes was the final judge. The 2 weeks leading up to the Founders' Ball were the quietest, most peaceful of my life. Alistair and I slipped into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. We spent our mornings in his sun-drenched library, reading the papers and drinking coffee, our silences as comfortable as our conversations. In the afternoons, I would venture out, exploring the city on my own terms, rediscovering streets and parks I had only ever seen through the lens of Liam's world. I was building a new life, piece by quiet piece. My books found a home on Alistair's shelves, nestled between his own. My clothes hung in a closet that smelled of cedar and lavender, a space that was mine, not a shared territory I had to negotiate. He gave me a key on our 3rd day as husband and wife. It was an old, ornate brass key for the townhouse's front door. He placed it in my palm, his hand covering mine for a moment. "This was Aline's," he said softly. "She would have liked you. She believed a house wasn't a home until it held the stories of the people inside it. I hope you'll add yours here." I closed my fingers around the cool metal. A key. A simple object, but it felt like a sacrament. For years, I had lived in a place that never truly felt like my own, waiting for permission to call it home. Waiting for a someday that was always just out of reach. Alistair didn't make me wait. He simply opened the door and invited me in. I never heard from Liam. Not a text, not a call, not an angry email. My note sat on the counter of our old apartment, a silent testament to my departure. His silence was more damning than any accusation he could have leveled. It confirmed what I already knew. My absence was an inconvenience, not a heartbreak. He was too consumed with the final push for his partnership to be bothered with the quiet implosion of his personal life. He probably assumed I was being overly dramatic, that I'd come back once I'd cooled off. The thought didn't even hurt anymore. It was just a clinical observation. One afternoon, a week before the ball, a large, cream-colored envelope arrived. It was identical to the one that had started this entire chain of events, with the firm's embossed logo in the corner. My hands were perfectly steady as I opened it. Inside, the invitation was printed on the same heavy cardstock, but the names were different: Mr. and Mrs. Alistair Hayes. I traced the letters of my new name with my fingertip. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a simple, undeniable fact. It felt like the truth. This wasn't about revenge anymore. I had thought, in those first dark weeks, that I wanted to see him hurt, that I wanted him to feel the same humiliation he had inflicted on me. But living with Alistair, being seen and valued for exactly who I was, had changed me. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a kind of crystalline clarity. My goal was no longer to make Liam feel small. My goal was to live a life so full and authentic that his memory would barely cast a shadow. Peace, I was discovering, was a far more satisfying pursuit than payback. The night of the ball arrived on a wave of crisp autumn air. The city was aglow, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. As I got ready, I felt a strange sense of calm. There was no anxiety, no feeling of being an imposter. I chose a dress Alistair had helped me pick out, a classic, floor-length gown in a soft ivory silk. It wasn't designed to attract attention. It was designed to feel like a second skin. It was graceful, understated, and confident. It was everything I was learning to be. Alistair came into the bedroom as I was fastening a simple pearl earring. He was in his tuxedo, looking distinguished and impossibly handsome. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes full of a quiet admiration that made my heart swell. He was holding a single, fragrant gardenia. "For my beautiful wife," he said, his voice a low rumble. He came over and helped me pin it in my hair. His fingers were warm and gentle against my skin. "You remember," I whispered, touching the velvety petals. "I remember everything about you, Faith," he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. In that moment, Liam Foster and his world of calculated ambitions felt a million miles away. They were a chapter from a book I had already finished reading. Tonight was not about him. It was about standing beside the man I loved, the man who had shown me what love was actually supposed to feel like. We arrived at the hotel, and the doorman rushed to open our car door. As Alistair helped me out, a sea of flashes went off. We were, I realized with a jolt, the center of attention. He was Alistair Hayes, a legend in the city's financial world, and I was the mysterious new wife no one had yet met. He tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, his presence a warm, solid shield against the curious stares. "Ready?" he murmured. "Ready," I said, and we walked inside. The ballroom was exactly as I remembered it from the photograph. A universe of crystal and champagne filled with the low hum of power and influence. But this time, I wasn't looking in from the outside. I belonged here. We made our way through the room, Alistair greeting people with effortless grace. He introduced me simply, proudly. "This is my wife, Faith." I saw the surprise, the curiosity, the quick, reassessing glances, but I also saw respect. Not because of who I was, but because of who I was with. It was a currency I was still getting used to. And then I saw him. Liam was holding court near the bar, a group of junior associates hanging on his every word. He looked impeccable in his tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled. He was laughing, that same confident, charming laugh from the photograph. He was radiating success. From a distance, he looked like he had already won. He hadn't seen us yet. Alistair's hand tightened reassuringly on mine. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. I took a slow, steadying breath. "I'm fine." And I was. Seeing him didn't spark pain or anger. It was like looking at a very old photograph of someone I used to know. There was a sense of detachment, of distance. He was a part of my past, not my present. As if sensing my gaze, Liam turned. His eyes scanned the room, sweeping over the crowd, and then they landed on Alistair. A huge, brilliant smile spread across his face, the smile of a protege seeing his mentor. He started walking toward us, weaving through the crowd. My heart began to beat a little faster, a purely physical reaction. This was it. The moment of collision. "Alistair," Liam's voice was full of energy. "So good to see you, sir. I was hoping to catch you." He came to a stop in front of us, his eyes fixed entirely on my husband. He hadn't even glanced at me. To him, I was just the anonymous woman on his boss's arm. "Liam," Alistair said, his voice perfectly even. "Good to see you as well. You've had a remarkable year." Liam practically glowed with pride. "Thank you, sir. I've given it my all." "I know you have," Alistair said. Then he turned his head slightly, his gaze including me in the circle. "Liam, there's someone I'd like you to meet." Liam's smile remained fixed, polite, as he finally turned his eyes toward me. For a fraction of a second, there was just blank professional courtesy. Then recognition dawned. It was a slow, horrifying cascade. I watched it happen in real time. The smile didn't just vanish, it froze, then shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a sickly, grayish pallor. His eyes, which had been so full of ambition a moment before, were now wide with a confusion so profound it looked like pain. His brain was trying to process an impossible equation. Me, here, on Alistair Hayes's arm. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked from my face to Alistair's, then back to mine, as if expecting one of us to laugh and tell him it was an elaborate joke. "Liam Foster," Alistair continued, his voice as calm and steady as a heartbeat. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Faith Hayes." The name landed in the space between us like a physical blow. I saw him flinch. He finally understood. Silence, the sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, all faded into a distant roar. A woman in a shimmering silver dress appeared at Liam's side. It was Isabella Croft. She smiled brightly, oblivious to the silent cataclysm unfolding before her. "Liam, darling, I was looking for you," she said, then she looked at us. "Mr. Hayes, what a pleasure." "Isabella," Alistair nodded politely. Liam was still staring at me, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He was seeing it all in that one moment. The note, my disappearance, this impossible reality. He was seeing years of his own casual cruelty, his dismissal of my life, his calculated betrayals, all converging into this single, devastating moment of poetic justice. He had excluded me from this very party, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. Now, he was the one on the outside looking in, standing before the very man he was desperate to impress, only to find that the woman he had deemed unworthy held all the power. I finally found my voice. I gave him a small, serene smile, the kind you give a stranger. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Liam, I said. My voice was quiet, steady, and utterly devoid of malice. And that, I think, was what finally broke him. My calmness, my peace. It was the one thing he couldn't fight. Isabella looked at him, a flicker of concern on her face. Liam, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at me, his world crumbling around him. Alistair placed a gentle hand on the small of my back. If you'll excuse us, he said to the frozen couple, I have an announcement to make. And with that, we turned and walked away, leaving Liam standing there, a ghost in his own success story. We found our table at the front of the ballroom. A few minutes later, Alistair stood at the podium. A hush fell over the crowd. I watched Liam from across the room. He was standing alone now, Isabella having drifted back to her friends. He looked small, lost, a ship without a rudder. Good evening, Alistair began, his voice filling the room. As you all know, tonight we celebrate not only the founding of this firm, but its future. And the future is built on leadership. He spoke about the candidates for the new partnership, praising their drive and talent. He mentioned Liam's name, and I saw a flicker of desperate hope in Liam's eyes. But a leader is defined by more than just their numbers, Alistair continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, for just a moment, on me. They are defined by their integrity, by their character, by their commitment to the people who make this firm great, both in this room and beyond it. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. It is therefore my great pleasure to announce that our new partner is David Chen. A polite but enthusiastic applause broke out. David, a quiet, hardworking senior associate I'd heard Alistair praise for his loyalty and decency, looked utterly stunned. I looked over at Liam one last time. He was just standing there, motionless, as the world celebrated another man's success. The success he had been so sure was his. The success for which he had sacrificed his integrity, his honesty, and the woman who had loved him. He had bet everything on someday. And he had lost it all in a single night. The car ride home was quiet. The city lights streamed past the window, a blur of gold and white. Alistair reached across the seat and took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. Are you all right? He asked. I thought about the look on Liam's face, the utter devastation. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph, a thrill of victory. Instead, I just felt quiet. I think so, I said. It feels finished. It is, he said simply. When we got home, he poured us both a small glass of brandy, and we sat in our familiar chairs in the library. The house was silent around us, a sanctuary. I owe you an explanation, he said, looking at me over the rim of his glass. I want you to know that my feelings for you developed long before I knew the specifics of your situation with Liam. But I did know. I knew he was living with a brilliant, kind woman whose career he dismissed as a hobby. I knew he took another woman to the Founders' Ball last year. I make it my business to understand the character of the men who work for me. I stared at him, surprised. I never would have acted on my feelings if you hadn't left him, he continued. Your choices had to be your own, but I admit I was hoping you would. I saw in you a spirit and an integrity that deserved to be cherished, not postponed. He used that word. Postponed. It was the perfect word for the life I had been living. I looked around the beautiful, quiet room, at the books filled with stories, at the art that spoke of resilience, at the man who saw me, truly saw me, from the very beginning. Liam had promised me someday. A vague, conditional future that was always dependent on him, but someday had arrived. Not because of him, but because of me, because I had finally decided I was worthy of a today. I stopped waiting for someone else to write my story. Respect can't be bought, and it can't be leveraged. That's what I learned. It has to be earned, but first, you have to give it to yourself. I took a sip of brandy, the warmth spreading through my chest. I thought of Liam, alone in that crowded ballroom, his bright future turned to ash. I didn't feel hatred or pity. I felt nothing at all. He was simply gone. I stopped waiting for his apology. Peace was mine to give. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe. More true-to-life tales of courage, family, and quiet revenge await here. Thank you for listening.